Hey guys, it's Kesara, and today I'm going to be doing my autumn book haul. So I missed my September upload for my September book haul, so this is going to be two book hauls in one. For September and for October, I have less books per month though. Like I got the same amount of books in 2 months as I typically get in 1 month. So it's kind of the same length, but it's still going to be pretty long because there is still quite a bit to talk about. So let's just get into it. So we're going to start this all off with my book of the month orders for September and October. I've already talked about my September books because I've already read them, and I have a vlog in which I read both of them, so I'll link that up in the cards if you guys want to check that out. But the books that I got in September were Anxious People by Frederick Bachman and One by One by Ruth Ware. Anxious People is about a bank robbery gone completely wrong because the robber tried to rob a cashless bank, so obviously there is nothing for them to steal. I absolutely loved this book, both for the incredible situation that it is, but also for all of the characters in this book. Frederick Bachman does such a good job of writing characters and just letting us understand their motivations. I absolutely love how it's switched between different character point of views, and the structure is done in such a way where it talks about the entire situation multiple times, but each from a different character's point of view. And it's so interesting to see how the different characters interact and how they're connected in ways that we don't expect them to be connected. I absolutely loved every second of this book, and I ended up giving it 4.75 stars. And then One by One by Ruth Ware is a psychological thriller novel. It's set in, I believe, the French Alps in a chalet, and it's about a corporate retreat, but one of the bosses of the corporation falls off the side of the mountain, or at least they think she did, and then they kind of lose touch with the rest of civilization, and then they start dying one by one, and it's fantastic. It has all of the creepy atmospheric vibes that you want from this type of novel, and all of the creepy vibes that you would expect from Ruth Ware in general. I absolutely love her writing, and this was probably my favorite Ruth Ware book yet, and I ended up giving this one 5 stars. For my October box, I have to say I'm a lot more excited for it than I thought I would be. The 2 books that I ended up getting for October are The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab and A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Now, I'm really glad I picked up A Deadly Education when I did, which was the first of the month, because it's no longer available on the Book of the Month website. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is still available. Out of the 2 of these, A Deadly Education is probably the one I'm the most excited for because it's described as kind of a dark magic school novel, and I absolutely love the magic school trope. I feel like that trope will just never get old, and dark magic school is even better than just a regular magic school, so I'm really, really excited for this. I'm not fully in the mood for this right now, but I definitely plan on getting to this before the end of the month, which this was not on my October TBR, because while I request this on NetGalley, I never got a response to that request, so I didn't even know if I'd have access to it, but now I just really, really want to read it. So yes, I'm super, super excited for this. Then we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which V.E. Schwab is a very hit or miss writer for me because I really didn't like the Darker Shade of Magic series, but I really did enjoy the Villains Duology. So I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this. Pretty much all year long, people have been hyping this up and putting this on their most anticipated reads of the year and stuff like that, and I've just been kind of am I gonna read it? Am I not? And then I saw it as one of the 5 Book of the Month Club picks, and I was just it's the book that calls to me the most, so why wouldn't I get it? So I'm hesitantly excited for this, and part of the reason that makes me even more excited about this is because I'm currently reading Middle Game by Shawnee McGuire, and Shawnee McGuire is another author that's pretty hit or miss for me in the same way V.E. Schwab is hit or miss for me, and I'm loving Middle Game. And the way Shawnee McGuire talks about Middle Game in interviews is kind of the same way V.E. Schwab talks about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and that makes me even more excited for this because it feels like she's put in a lot of time and effort into this book that maybe she hasn't in all of her other books. So I feel like this could potentially be one of my favorite V.E. Schwab books, and I'm kind of in the mood for this type of book. It's about a girl from France from the 1700s, I believe, who makes a sort of Faustian deal to become immortal, but because of that, now everyone she meets forgets who she is until she finds someone who doesn't forget who she is. It just sounds like the perfect mix of magic and sort of atmosphere for the mood that I'm in. So I feel like this one, even though I'm more excited for A Deadly Education, I feel like I'm going to be picking up this one sooner rather than later. Also, the audiobook narrator in this is Julia Whalen, and she's one of my favorite audiobook narrators, so I'm super excited for that as well. So I also acquired quite a few books that I've already read. This is partially because of some sales that happened. Every time I see a book on sale that is a book that I really, really liked that I had originally borrowed from the library when I read it, and I know I'm gonna reread it at some point in the future, I definitely pick up a copy for it. So I have a few books in that category. The first one is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So this is a classic tale style of romantic suspense. I absolutely love this. This is fantastic. It's following a character who is unnamed, and she gets married at a pretty young age and goes back to Manderley with her new husband and is kind of haunted by the ghost of his wife, whose name is Rebecca. And it is fantastic. I love every second of this. This has all of like the gothic horror vibes that you could possibly want. It is absolutely fantastic. And I believe back when I read this, I gave this 4.5 stars. I'm definitely due for a reread of this one though. The next one that I picked up is also a classic, and that's Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I read this earlier this year, and oh my gosh, it completely blew my mind. It's definitely the type of book that I feel like I'm going to reread over and over again, just because you can't wrap your mind completely around it the first time around. Like, there's no way. So this is about a black man in the 1950s straddling the racial divide, and it is absolutely fantastic. It is mind-bending in the best ways and very thought-provoking and dark at times, and I absolutely loved every second of this. I don't remember for sure, but I believe I gave this book 5 stars. The next book that fits this category is The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So this is a historical fantasy novel set in the antebellum South, and it features the Underground Railroad in a very interesting way. I absolutely loved every second of this book. When I went into it, I thought it was a little bit more magical realism, but it definitely has some more fantastical elements because there's a little bit of a more obvious magic system in here than you would expect from like your typical magical realism. But either way, I absolutely loved it. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a fantastic author that I found for the first time this year, and I absolutely love his writing and want to read pretty much everything that he writes. This was the first book that I read by him, but I have since picked up quite a few other of his works, even though like most of them are nonfiction, which I don't read as much nonfiction as I do fiction, but this book was so good, so thought-provoking, but at the same time still really entertaining, and I absolutely loved every second of this one as well. I ended up giving this one a 4.5 stars. And the last of the books on this book haul that I've already read, I actually read after I bought, but I've already read it, and that's The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie. This is a grimdark fantasy novel. It's the second novel in the Age of Madness trilogy, which is the third trilogy-ish, sort of, in the First Law series. I absolutely love this series. It's one of my favorite series of all time. I've talked about this book endlessly on my channel at this point, and I can't say too much without giving away a lot of spoilers, but I absolutely love this. There were some great reveals in this, and I can't wait to see what the third and final book in this trilogy is going to be like. Absolutely fantastic book. Absolutely love Joe Abercrombie as an author. He's one of my favorite authors of all time, and of course I ended up giving this book 5 stars. So moving on to some a little bit more high fantasy picks, I decided to pick up the other 2 books in the World of Five Gods by Lois McMaster Bujold. I quite recently read The Curse of Chalion and absolutely loved it, so I decided to pick up the sequel, Paladin of Souls, as well as the prequel, The Hallowed Hunt. I'm really excited for this because Lois McMaster Bujold is one of those authors that her writing is so subtle in a very interesting way, and it kind of just creeps up on you and you don't realize how good it is until like you get to the end and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So The Curse of Chalion definitely crept up on me a lot. I absolutely loved it, and I'm really excited to see what she does in the other 2 books in the series, as well as like all of her other writings, because she's definitely an author that I plan to read a lot more of in the future. The next one that I decided to pick up is The Sacred Hunt Duology by Michelle West. I've heard really good things about Michelle West as a fantasy author as well. For some reason, this cover just spoke to me in a way that I didn't expect it to, and when I saw that it was written by Michelle West, I was just like, it sounds like something that I might like. I haven't actually read anything by her. I do plan on reading The Broken Crown sometime in the near future by this author, so hopefully I'll end up loving that and I'll want to read more of her books. And also it's a bind up of 2 books in one, and honestly I can't resist that kind of discount because I'm basically getting 2 books for the price of one, and I'm really excited about that. I don't actually know what this is about, but it looks really intriguing and I want to give this author a try as well. And the next one that I picked up is Shadow March by Tad Williams. So in one of my previous book hauls, I don't remember which, I got an order from Better World Books because they were running a book sale and I had never ordered from them before, so I wanted to try to order some of their used books. So I ended up getting like, I think it was like something like 15 books for like 30 bucks. Like, it was really cheap, and one of the books that I got was Shadow Play, not realizing that it was the second book in a series. So after I realized that it was the second book in a series, I needed to get the first book in the series, I decided to pick up Shadow March, which I got from Thrift Books. I got this one used as well, so at a really good price, and it's in pretty good condition. It's not perfect condition, but it's pretty good condition, and I'm excited for this. I haven't read anything by Tad Williams either. He's definitely an author that I plan to get to as well. I'll probably start with the Dragonbone Chair, which is like his first series, but I do plan to get to some of his later works because I do realize a lot of authors, their first series may not be their best, but if you try some of their later works, it may be better. So hopefully I'll like the first series, but if not, I'll have this one as well for me to pick up and try because I've heard really great things about this author in general. So the next book I bought was somewhat premeditated, but it was kind of also on a whim, and that's Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahiran. So the first book in this duology, Serpent and Dove, I bought on a complete whim last year, and I enjoyed it. Like, it was definitely one of those almost guilty pleasure sort of like very romance-fueled high fantasy series, kind of like similar to like Sarah J Maas books, like if that gives you an idea of what the series is like. And I gave the first book 3.5 stars. So when I saw this book was coming out, I was excited for it, but I had completely planned to just borrow it from my library. But when it came out, I found myself picking the book up. I'm actually really excited to get to this. I don't know if I'm gonna get to it very soon, but I'm definitely gonna get to it before the end of the year, and I'm really excited for it. This is about a witch who is kind of tricked into an arranged marriage with a witch hunter, and it has all of the complex goodness that comes from that sort of setup. And I did really enjoy the first book, and I'm excited to see how the series continues. So also kind of guilty pleasure buys, I got the Kyoshi books from the Avatar: The Last Airbender series. So I got The Rise of Kyoshi and The Shadow of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee. So I've heard pretty good things about this, and Avatar: The Last Airbender is like one of my favorite series of all time, especially from when I was little. I recently found the graphic novels of the series, which for the most part, I really love the graphic novels. And Avatar Kyoshi is one of the avatars that intrigued me the most from like the historical list of back avatars. So I'm really excited to get to these. I've heard really good things specifically about the first book, but the second book literally just came out. I honestly don't know if I'm gonna get to them soon, but I just like having them on my shelf because I know I'm probably gonna read these over and over again. Next, I decided to get Modern Fairy Tales by Holly Black. Holly Black is one of the few YA authors that I actually really like. I haven't read a whole lot of YA this year, almost no YA this year actually. And last year, one of the series that really opened up my mind to YA in general was the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, and I read quite a few of her other novels around the same time period and ended up really loving them. So I decided to pick this up because I feel like this might just get me back into the YA mood a little bit, because I've literally spent the entire year only reading adult books, which is fine. Like, I have no issue with that, but I do love YA also. I'm hoping that this might be able to get me back into that spirit. It's like 3 novellas that's all bound up into one. I did not realize that it's as thick as it is, so I don't know if I'm gonna get to it anytime soon because of that, but hopefully I will, because like I have so many YA books on like my like long-term TBR that I just haven't picked up this year because I just haven't been in the mood for YA. So hopefully this will make me more in the mood for it, because I love the way Holly Black writes, especially YA fantasy. So the next book that I decided to pick up is The Power by Naomi Alderman. I got this one on sale because it has a little cut on the back, so it's slightly damaged, but it's still in really good condition otherwise. And this book's been on my radar for a while. It's set in like a futuristic or like near future sort of world in which women and girls have sort of superpowers, maybe? I don't know very much about this book, but I've just been hearing a lot about this book, so I've been really intrigued by it. So when I saw it on sale, I was just like, let me grab this while I can. I don't know if I'm gonna get to this month or necessarily even this year, but I'm excited to have it, and hopefully I will get to it soon. So the next book that I decided to pick up is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. So when I was planning out this video, I didn't realize, but I've already actually read this book. Octavia E. Butler is like one of my new favorite authors, and I feel like the last couple of hauls that I've had, every single one of them has had an Octavia E. Butler book on there. Pretty much every single TBR that I've had since I think July, I've had a book by Butler on it. Since I picked up this one in July, I've read at least one of her books a month, if not 2 or 3. So I'm absolutely loving her as an author. This one is a historical time travel novel, kind of along the same strain as Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, but it is a lot darker. It's featuring a Black woman from the 1970s or 80s, around when the book was published, who accidentally travels back in time to the antebellum South, which is just a really cool concept. And it's something that when I picked up this book, I didn't realize, but I've been looking for this type of book for the longest time without even fully realizing it. Because one of the reasons I've shied away from historical fiction a lot is because when it has historical fiction set in like the early 1900s or the 1800s, in those time periods, I feel like those time periods are kind of glorified. And I always think like, if I went back to that time period, I would not have the same experience as this protagonist is having in this book, but with a black woman going back to a time when slavery exists. I feel like you get a little bit more of a realistic feel to that time period that really worked for me in this book. I absolutely loved this. It is shocking at times, it's thought-provoking, it is really, really dark, but at the same time, it has some really interesting relationships and unlikable, but still somehow relatable characters, and I absolutely love this, and I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. And I also decided to pick up a couple of books by Cixin Liu. I picked up Ball Lightning and Supernova Era. So Cixin Liu is the author of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, which I read the second book in the trilogy, The Dark Force, in September, and after I read that book, I was just like, oh my gosh, Cixin Liu is such a great author. So I picked up all of the books that I could find by him that were already translated to English, because he's a Chinese language author who is from China, obviously, and I'm so excited for both of these. I'm a little disappointed that I haven't already read Ball Lightning, because Ball Lightning is referenced in The Three-Body Problem, which is the first book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past series. So it's set in the same world, but in a previous time period to that series. But I'm kind of okay with it, because I can kind of think of this as sort of a prequel, maybe? I don't know, but I'm excited to get to both of these. I will definitely be reading Death's End first, which is the third book in that trilogy, but I'm super excited to get to more of his books, because he has a very subtle, but like really interestingly structured writing style that really, really works for me, and I absolutely love it. So this next book is kind of random, but I decided to pick up In the Midst of Winter by Isabel Allende. I've been meaning to pick up more books by Isabel Allende. I read her first book, House of Spirits, back in high school, but it was one of my favorite books that I read that semester, and I absolutely love magical realism, so I've been meaning to pick up more of her books, and I saw this one in the bargain section, so I was just like, I kind of want it. I'm probably gonna pick up more of her books. I don't think this is the next book by her that I'm going to read. I either want to read Portrait in Sepia or Daughter of Fortune next, because both of those I've heard quite a bit about, but I feel like this might be a good book for like the beginning of the year, like January, February, in the midst of winter. Just sounds like it'd be a good book for that time period, and Isabel Allende has some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever read, so I'm definitely excited to get to this one early next year. So I found another book that I actually already read that I forgot to include in the first section, and that's Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I absolutely love this. I think I actually started this book on audio before I picked this book up, and then I picked it up, not realizing that this was an autographed edition, by the way. I'm actually really excited about that. I got an autographed edition! That happens occasionally. I think I have like maybe 2 books, other than like some of the book subscription box books that I've had, that are signed by the author, which I just think is so cool that you can find a book signed by the author in bookstores. But I absolutely loved this. So I read this at the very beginning of October, and this was just perfect for the mood that I was in, because it is so atmospheric and beautifully written, but at the same time really creepy. It's like that perfect mix of like fantasy and horror with a lot of elements of suspense, but at the same time it has some really great characters in it. There's a really good mother-son relationship in this that is really, really well done. I loved everything about this book. It does have Christian themes in it, so if that bothers you, you may not like this as much, but I absolutely loved it, and I ended up giving it 4.75 stars. And also in the horror genre, I decided to pick up Nosferatu by Joe Hill. So I've heard really great things about Joe Hill as a writer. He's, I believe, the son of Stephen King, so he has kind of like deep roots in horror. I've heard a lot of really good things about him in general as a horror author, and this is the book that I think I hear about the most, and I believe this is about killer zombies during Christmas time or something like that, or maybe it's killer vampires. One of the two, or it could be some sort of virus that makes people become vampires. I'm honestly really curious now. It doesn't actually say on the back of the book. That makes me a little sad that it doesn't say anything. I will say though, I like that they have illustrations in a mass market paperback. It's just fantastic. I love that. But I'm really excited for this. I don't think I'm gonna end up reading this in October, even though like I had originally planned to read this book in October, which is part of the reason why I bought it. But I'm just not in the mood for like horror that's this terrifying. I may still pick it up if I fall into that mood, because you never know what might happen. But I'm kind of planning for this like later in the year, like closer to Christmas time, just because it has some of those themes as well, which I'm excited for. I don't know. I've heard this is really action-packed though, so I'm excited for that. It'll be my first book by Joe Hill, so hopefully I'll end up loving it, and then I could read all of his other books. Now we're gonna move on to nonfiction, which I know I don't talk about nonfiction very often, but I decided to put this at the end of the video for people who don't actually want to hear about nonfiction. But all 3 of the books that I got that were nonfiction, I actually have already read, and they're all fantastic. comics, so since I decided to get physical copies of them, I kind of wanted to share that with you guys as well. The first book that I picked up is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is such a cute little edition of the book. I absolutely love this edition. It's hardcover too, so like it's a really sturdy edition of this book. This is obviously by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is one of my new favorite authors, and this is kind of like a letter written to his son about what it's like to be a Black man in America. It's very thought-provoking and really well written and absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love this. I ended up giving this, I believe, 4.5 stars the first time I read it, but I definitely plan on revisiting it probably quite often, and I'm really excited for that. I think Ta-Nehisi Coates is just such a fantastic author that I want to read more by, and I definitely plan on picking up more of his nonfiction in the future. And let's just face it, I'm probably gonna read all of his fiction. Like, I've already seen that he's written some issues of Black Panther for the comic series, which while I have found kind of a love for graphic novels, I'm still kind of staying away from like Marvel and the Avengers and those sort of comics. But because Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote some of the Black Panther ones, I'm actually really tempted to try those. And the other nonfiction books that I decided to pick up are Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind and Homo Deus, both by Yuval Noah Harari. I absolutely loved these. Like, these were so fascinating, intriguing. I loved every second of this. So Sapiens is kind of like a really condensed history of humankind, like from 10,000 years ago up until today. And I absolutely love the way it's done. It's done in the most intriguing way, and I absolutely love it. It's so factual. You learn so much from reading this book, but it's done in such an interesting way that I absolutely loved reading it. And then Homo Deus is kind of like a look into the future of what our future might look like based off of the type of technologies and things that are happening today. And I absolutely love it. It talks a lot about kind of algorithms and things like that, which I think is incredibly interesting. And it's almost like reading sci-fi, except it's nonfiction. And I love both of these and highly recommend both of them. Also, the audiobooks of these are absolutely fantastic. After listening to the audiobooks, I knew eventually that I was going to end up picking the physical copies because I know I'm going to be rereading these at some point in the future. So that's all I have for you guys. If you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments because I would love to discuss it with you guys. I post videos on Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. And if you'd like to be notified as soon as I upload, you can click that little bell icon. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.